Well, hello there, ladies and gents. Good to see you again, and welcome back to Lessons by the Lake, the Oswego Private Wealth Show. I am Ryan Ruff, your moderator, and as always, I'm going to be joined by my right-hand man, star of our show. That's Bob Bedritis, the managing director of Oswego Private Wealth. And also joining Bob and I on the show today is going to be Mr. Paul Dickson. Paul's going to be joining us. He is the managing director over at Focus Investment Bankers. We got a really interesting conversation on tap for you guys today with Paul. You know, as we do typically with Bob, a lot of his work at Oswego Private Wealth is working with business owners because they believe that business owners truly deserve to maximize the value of their life's work. And at the end of the day, we love to have conversations surrounding these different intersections of life and their business. And boy, is there quite an intersection where Paul comes into play with the investment banking side of things. So with that, let's go ahead and say hi to Bob before we bring Paul out here. Bob, good to see you today. How you doing?
Good to see you, Ryan. It's good to be here.
Yeah, great. Always great to be with you, Bob. And Bob, you wanted to have Paul onto the show today. He brings a lot of value and expertise from his organization. Why don't you frame things up for our audience before we get Paul out here and dive into the conversation today? Why Paul? And what do we have on tap today for our discussion?
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, Ryan. Well, Paul and I have known each other a long time. I think we've been friends for about 20 years now. And Paul, I'm going to ask Paul to tell us a little bit more about it, but he's had a very, very interesting, impactful, powerful, I'll say powerful career. And recently, Paul and I were sitting down together, and Paul was sharing with me a white paper that he's written, which is fantastic. I devoured it. But anyway, with all that said, let me introduce Paul. Let me say hi to you, Paul. Paul, how you doing?
I'm great, Bob. How you doing?
Doing great, man. It's great,
Good to see you.
great day at Oswego Private Wealth. So
Every day is a
anyway,
great day for you, right?
yeah, pretty much. It's hard. I'm hard pressed to have a bad day because we just love what we do. So anyway, with all that said, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I don't know that I could do justice with all the great things you've done in your
Yeah,
career.
sure. Born and raised in Portland, Oregon, went to school in California, went to law school, and after law school, very long story short, practiced law and also got into the business side in the semiconductor industry. Ended up traveling the world, helping to stock semiconductor fabs with capital equipment. Worked for several different Fortune 500 CapEx companies like Applied Materials, KLA, Tencor. And after I did that, I started up a software company, and we did what's called process control software, which basically is self-explanatory, keeps processes on track. And many industries use it. We use it for semiconductor. And the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because the work I did at my company, which we ended up selling, by the way, to a public company, the work I did at my company led me to think that a lot of the things that we did vis-a-vis manufacturing floors for semiconductor could be utilized by companies for their entire operation. And in fact, many companies do utilize something similar to what we'll be talking about today.
So your work at Focus Investment Bankers, I mean, you have been on the M&A side with some really significant companies. I mean, you're not doing dry cleaners in a local market. You've been really involved in some really terrific companies where you got this thesis that you have and this way of working that you have, talking about the two-track leader. So could you tell us a little bit about what is a strategic two-track leader?
Right. So a strategic two-track leader is, first of all, a leader who thinks strategically. And let me just go back real quick. The kinds of companies that I mostly work with are what I call lower middle market companies. Those would be companies with let's say revenues between 20 and 100 million ish, and EBITDA, which we'll talk about, between, let's say, 2 and 20 million, those kinds of companies. So back to strategic two-track leadership, it's essentially where a leader acts strategically and runs his business on two tracks. pretty self-explanatory. So let's just quickly walk through it. Being strategic means being forward-looking, looking at the big picture, understanding how your industry is doing, understanding how the general economy is doing, understanding how your customers' industries are doing, and spending more time on those kinds of things, understanding how to build value in your business, which we'll talk about. So spending more time doing that kind of work will incur much greater reward long-term for business owners than just focusing on pure cash flow and profits. Okay, so that's the strategic part. And then we talk about running on 2 tracks. So to me, the 2 tracks of a business, track 1 is growth and profits, and track 2 is value and exit. There is overlap between the tracks, and I would say that 90% of business owners that I've worked with and met run almost all only on track 1, which means they're spending every day, in fact, some of them not even in growth. They're focused on profits. They're focused on paying bills. They're focused on, sending their kids to good schools. They're focused on paying their mortgage, saving money for retirement. And they don't think beyond that. They don't think out of the box very well in terms of how to build value at the same time, and how to start preparing for exit literally from at any point in time when you're running your business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, total sense. Matter of fact, I had a meeting this morning with a great friend, great client, who probably about 7 years ago now sold his business, sold their business, significant business, significant sale price. And I mentioned to him that we were doing this podcast today, and he said, "Well, what's the theme? What's the topic? Who's your guest?" And I told him a bit about it, and he paused for a minute and said something that I did not expect him to say. He said, I should have listened to this 7, 8 years ago. He goes, "We did a fantastic job of creating value, running our business, profitability." And he said, "We really didn't do a very good job on track 2. I think he did fine because he's living a life of amazing significance, and ultimately he did fine. But even here's somebody on the other side of a very successful exit who said, I never thought about 2 tracks. He goes, we were just on 1 track, and we never got there." And so he's gonna love listening to this podcast, by the way. But nonetheless, that's feedback we get from people who even have had successful exits looking backwards, that they didn't pay attention to that 2nd track.
Yeah, I've seen it so many times where a business owner, when they start thinking about selling, either they have to sell for some reason, or they get approached out of the blue by a buyer, or they plan for retirement, or whatever the reason is, they're not ready. And they don't realize they're not ready. They don't realize they're not ready until they start talking to the buyer. And then they realize, when they get into questions from the buyer, oh my God, I should have thought through this a long time ago. And this happens quite a bit. And so what I'm trying to do is save business owners the pain and suffering that they go through under, especially diligence, the diligence process when you sell your business, by being well prepared for that. It's well worth it.
Paul, you mentioned, I mean, the 2 different tracks. Obviously, we are on par with them in terms of understanding at this point, but you mentioned a strategic 2-track leader. So in your definition of what it means to be a strategic 2-track leader, could you go into what is strategic? What does that mean really in your eyes?
Yeah, well, so I touched on it before, but basically it's, as the leader of the company, and this actually applies to any leader of any even division of a company or group within a company. But as a leader of a company, you have to learn how to delegate tactical work to your people. So you have to, there's many variables involved, but bottom line is, you should be thinking big picture. As Michael Gerber wrote a book called E-Myth Revisited, very famous business book. And he calls it working on your business, not just in your business. So I call it the daily bombardment. So while you're running your business, you're just getting bombarded daily by things. And you have to figure out a way to get out of that mode and to get into thinking about the future for your business, the big picture for your business, and how also, what's your exit plan for your business? And it's never too early. My business, my software business, I mean, I'm not really necessarily patting myself on the back, but I kind of lucked into thinking about exit early on. And bottom line was that really helped as we grew the business. In terms of some of the trade-offs, maybe I can chat quickly about that. Oftentimes it costs time and money to run on track 2. You may have to do things in your business in order to be successful on track 2 and prepare for exit. They're going to cost you some money along the way, which is going to impact potentially in the short term your profits, but it's reinvesting in your business. And so most exits that I've seen, the business owner made more money on exit than they did the entire life of the business. So if you do it right, it's definitely worth it.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Paul. I mean, one of the things that we often engage with business owners, we talked about this on a previous show, that a very high percentage, I don't remember the exact number, but something like 62, 63% of business owners don't work with somebody like me, a wealth manager, somebody who manages things outside of the business. And it's understandable because they have the majority of their assets, their life's work is tied up into that business. So very often we engage as a first step with a business owner doing a business audit and doing a valuation, doing a professional valuation of the business, because it's almost a proverb for me that so many business owners say, I believe my business is worth X. It's almost kind of like my house is worth X because my neighbor down the street sold for X. That may or may not be true. And oftentimes business owners look like that. And again, you can't manage what you don't measure. You can't make good strategic planning if you really don't know the state of your flocks, right? As the Bible says, know the state of your flocks. You need to know, what is my business really worth? And then that business audit we take a look at all kinds of things, from their accounts receivable to payable to return on equity, return on cash flow, things like that. And we just give them a good baseline look. It's probably preliminary to the work you do. Maybe it's actually side by side with the work that you do, but it's something that we think is just so critical for a business owner to at least begin with that process in mind.
Right. Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And as far as what's your business worth, I get that question all the time. My short answer to that question is it's worth what a buyer will pay for it. Okay. And your job as the business owner is to influence that buyer. Okay. And there's ways to do it, which you talked about. There's different ways to go about building value in your business, but you need to understand how it's like selling anything else. You mentioned a house. Okay. It's like selling a house. It's like selling in the old days, I sold very, very high-end, high-tech capital, very expensive capital equipment. It's no different. You need to understand your buyer. You need to understand your target market, right? You need to understand their needs, what they're looking for, their requirements, and then you make sure you fill their needs better than anyone else. Okay. And if you do that and you do it at value, you can be successful. And it's no different in selling your business. The big difference is most business owners only sell a business once in their lives. And so they don't know what it takes to get it done. And that's why I say they really need professionals like yourself, like myself, like transaction lawyers. Nothing against lawyers, I am one, but not a standard corporate attorney who protects you from every single risk in the world. But transaction lawyer and a transaction accountant and tax person who has done deals and understands the goal is to get the deal done, is to negotiate, give and take to get the deal done. So anyway, that's just another little nuance to selling a business versus selling other things.
Well, Paul, you're preaching to the choir on that one, because I am totally adherent to that you have to have a team. You have to have the right team around you. That's why our virtual family office creates that team, helps the business owner, yourself as an example. Before I want to dig a little more deeply on track 2 with you, but before we go there, could you explain what is the one-page business management framework?
Okay, so this is basically track 1. Okay, so remember I mentioned closed loop control. So bottom line is what you're doing is upper left, you'll see the current business, the state of the business, and then I'm going to show you really quickly how you break your business down. But basically, this is how each area of your business is today, and you score yourself. Okay, like let's say on a 1 to 10, how are we doing in finance? How are we doing in sales and marketing? How are we doing in operations and others? Okay. Then you put together in 2, you have to put together a strategic plan. Remember we talked about planning? You want to put together a strategic plan and an exit plan. So you have a roadmap. So you have a place where everybody is shooting. Okay? That's where you want to go. Where do we want to go? Then you put together a scorecard or dashboard. And by the way, as I'm going through this, a lot of business owners go, "Oh, I do that anyway." Great. Okay, then you're doing the right thing. This is just a good visual way to show them what they should be doing, and if there's something missing in how they do it, this is also just a good way to work with your people to get things done. Okay, so you put together your dashboard, which is essentially what are our goals, what are our KPIs, key performance indicators, what are our problems? Remember we talked about the daily bombardment. What are the problems that are hitting our company? Then you do the who, what, when action plans for each of them. And people have ownership and accountability at this point. Then you measure the outputs. It's essentially, how do we do? Okay. On all these actions that we you can't do everything at once, right? So you have to prioritize. How are we doing? And some of these may be weekly, some of these may be monthly, some of these may be quarterly. It depends on how you want to measure things. A lot of things in the business, in my opinion, should be measured weekly. Okay, how are we doing? Then you feed back. Basically, depending on what you found in terms of the results of your actions, you fixed something, you didn't fix something, it got better, it got worse, right? So you go back into your scorecard and you put in the data that you measured. How are we doing? Okay, then you go back to your current state, and let's just say that it was an item in operations. Okay, did it make a difference to our operations? And if so, can we bump our score from a 4 to a 5 at this point? And it's iterative, and it's a closed loop, and you just keep doing it over and over and over again, and you run your business. We don't have time to go into a lot more detail, but I'm going to say on this section where you break your business down, let me just give you a few areas where you break it down. You as a strategic leader are an area. Your leadership team is an area. Your people throughout the organization is an area. Your sales and marketing, your operations, your finance. And then there's a few areas that I believe are important that you don't see a lot out there, which is in terms of other sort of business planning type of systems that people use. Innovation, I think, is really important. You have to constantly be working on innovation, and risk is another area that's really important. You have to understand the risks to your business along the way. What can risks be? They can be, force majeure hurricane. They can be global warming. I mean, frankly, they're putting global warming now into public company risks. Probably not a big risk for you, but it's an example of a risk. You can have technology risk. You can have customer risk. So anyway, the point is, you break it out. You score each area of your company, and you work on improving. And that's how it works.
So Paul, moving on now and focusing on value and exit track two. You had mentioned to me something you call cleaning up your business. What does that mean?
Typically, the number one area that I recommend that you clean up your business is financially. Okay? Because finance is the language of business, and buyers are going to look at your numbers first and foremost. So you need to make sure that your financials are clean. What do I mean by that? It means that they are you've either had them audited, or you've had what's called a quality of earnings. You can Google that, quality of earnings done, which buyers do themselves, which goes into your books and basically determines what is really happening in your business and making sure that your financials reflect the reality of your business and they are accurate and trustworthy for buyers. Okay, that's cleaning up financially. Operationally, let's say let me go back to finance. I'm sorry. Really importantly, you want to make sure you need a person in your business, not Uncle Joe running your books. You need especially in the lower middle market here, and when you're dealing with buyers, especially today post-COVID, you need a professional who knows your numbers backwards and forwards, and who can deal with buyers and answer their questions. Critical, because buyers, if they detect that you don't know your numbers, down to the SKU level, down to the by customer level, by product level, margin level, they will run. Okay, so that's cleaning up your business financially. There's many ways, but I'll just give one other example. Operationally, every buyer who is going to walk into your business, what are they going to see? I've dealt with a lot of manufacturing concerns. Believe me, we had to do a lot of cleanup. It's look and feel, it's curb appeal. It's like when you clean up a house, right? You do you trim your hedges, you mow your lawn, you make sure everything, you can stage your house, right? You just make it sure that it looks good. It makes a big difference. It makes a big difference in buyers' perceptions. So that's what I mean by cleaning up your business.
Well, thank you, Paul. Well, and you're talking about what we like to refer to around here as the human element of a business. I mean, this is not one AI robot buying a business from another AI robot. There always is the emotional, the human element that comes into play in every transaction, every human transaction, frankly, right? So you have talked to me a little bit about your motivations, your why. How important is it for a business owner to know the why of their motivations, their why of selling their business?
Your motivations for selling your business will oftentimes determine how you sell your business. So there are good motivations and bad motivations. So some good motivations are your numbers are looking great, your industry's looking up, and you want to take some chips off the table. And there's ways, by the way, you can sell part of your business. You don't have to sell all of it. So that's a good way. Or you want to retire and you just want to move on. By the way, you're never going to be able to move on right away. You're going to have to stick around for a while no matter what. But in any case, so those might be some good motivations. Some bad motivations might be divorce, might be health reasons, might be dissension between owners. I've been involved in those. You want to try to, in every way possible, make sure your motivations for selling are good. You will get a higher price, you will get more buyers, you will get a much better experience if your motivation is good. If your motivation is bad, you're not, because buyers, even if you don't tell them, they will sense it and they'll figure it out. So just do everything you can. Like, for example, if you have dissension between owners, which I've actually been in the middle of and mediated, you want to make sure that you've got to fix it. You cannot go to market and sell your business if you have squabbling owners. Now, lots of times there are squabbling owners, and you do go to market, but that has to be addressed all up front legally. You have to have a clean, what's called a buy-sell agreement. Even if you don't have one, you need to put it together, and you need to, act civilly to each other through the process. Again, buyers will sniff it out. So that's what I mean by motivations.
Well, they will sniff it out. So buyers, is there an ideal type of buyer, a probable buyer?
Yeah.
It varies situation to situation.
So there's basically three types of buyers. Strategic buyers typically are in your industry or near your industry, and they do what you do, or they could be customers, they could be suppliers, could be competitors. Strategic buyers, financial buyers are like private equity firms, financial firms that are looking at your company. And then there's you can sell to your partners, or you can sell to employees. You can sell ESOP or other ways. So there's three main types. So let's just do a quick walkthrough. Strategic is usually the best type. You want to try to find, remember I said it's like selling anything else. You need to understand the buyers. You want to find a buyer who, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, right? So the buyer's got a puzzle and there's a piece missing. You want your company to fit perfectly into that piece. And if you can find that, if you can make that, and by the way, this is what I mean by track 2 of running your company. You need to be thinking about this as you're building your company. What do buyers want? What are the missing pieces in the jigsaw puzzle? And then the more you can fit a missing piece for a buyer, the more value you're going to get, the more they're going to pay. So it's like, I call it 1 + 1 = 3. Okay. So a financial buyer, private equity firm, for example, they look at your business differently. They look at, obviously they want cash flow, but they also look at return on investment on exit, because their goal is to buy your business, put systems and processes in place and capital to grow your business, and then turn around and sell it in maybe 5 years. So they're looking on what's the value going to be on sale. And then the third kind of buyer, which is sort of the inside buyer, the partner or the family member or the employee, they are going to look, they know your industry typically, they know your company. It's what they know, and so they want to buy what they know. And so many times I've dealt with sellers that are willing to sell to one of those types of buyers for less than they would on the open market. Not very often, because once they see offers from the open market, they realize, oh, maybe I underpriced my business. But in any case, those are the three main types of buyers.
Yeah, it's interesting, the strategic buyer as opposed to the financial buyer. I recently sat down with a business owner who sold quite a few years ago, and it was a pretty successful sale. He sold to a financial buyer, technology space, for about $250 million. Fantastic. And then just for fun, I just Googled the business and I saw that the private equity firm sold that same $250 million business 4 years later for $1.2 billion. So there's a little delta there, a little disconnect there.
They may have put 100 million in.
Yeah, no question
Don't
about
know.
it. And I don't believe anybody was crying about a $250 million sale either.
Right.
So do we agree that most business owners predominantly focus on track 1?
Yes.
Okay, so what are some of the trade-offs when you start thinking about, I need to do some focus on track 2? What are some of the trade-offs when the business owner starts thinking about track 2 as well?
Well, I touched on it earlier that oftentimes in track 2, where you're building value, you have to reinvest in your business. So one of the big trade-offs is money. I mean, is taking money and taking it out of your pocket. You've been used to putting it in your pocket the whole time, and you have to reinvest in the business. I can give you a bunch of examples. I worked with a company that had a ERP enterprise resource planning system that they'd had from day one, and they'd outgrown it, and it was stretched beyond its capabilities. Well, when you go to sell the business, the buyer is going to look at that and go, well, we need to immediately put, $200,000 into your company to buy a new ERP system. And they're going to dock you that amount of money because they have to put it in right away to make the business viable, to grow. So that's an example of a trade-off of having to invest in something. I talked about Uncle Joe. Unfortunately, you reach a point, Uncle Joe ain't going to cut it anymore. So you have to look at bringing professional people in sometimes, and they cost more money. So you have to invest in people. You have to invest in training of people sometimes. So those are just kind of a few examples of some of the ways that you have to do that. And another example, a big one, is what I call customer concentration. Okay, so customer concentration is a huge issue for buyers. Typically, they don't want one customer being more than 10% of your revenue or your profits. Okay, I've seen many times where business owners have one customer that is 50% plus. They started low and they just, exploded, and it's great. And they're placing all this business, and you're making all this money. Problem is, you go to sell the business, and I've literally had buyers walk without even looking at the business if a customer is 50% of their business. Why? Because I mentioned, remember the 11 areas of the business I mentioned, risk. That's a huge risk to a buyer. They won't pay for that. Some will discount, some will walk. So what do you need to do? This is a track 1 versus track 2 trade-off. What do you need to do? Well, typically what I recommend is you need to get your salespeople pounding on doors that are complementary to the one that's booming, and you need to build them up. So the one that's booming now, instead of 50% of your business, as you grow, you need to build other areas of your business up to get that percentage down. So that's another area of trade-offs between the tracks.
Well, I think there's a lot of wisdom there. By the way, you have to be a certain age to appreciate the comment I'm about to make. But when every time you mentioned Uncle Joe, I can't help thinking about Petticoat Junction. Good old Uncle Joe with his cardigan sweater on. So you gave me.
Joe was moving kind of slow at the junction.
He was.
I think Ryan's a little too young for that.
Yeah, I think you guys have me beat on this one.
All right. Well, you can Google anybody that not of a certain age.
And by the way, there's
a great show.
I deal with a lot of family businesses, and I have nothing against family businesses or family members, but when you are thinking about track 2, you need to think about when certain people have certain situations have outgrown the current people, and you have loyalty to those people, whether they're family or not. I've been involved in businesses where they have so much loyalty to their original people who fought the good fight with them. But at some point, you really don't have any choice. You can put them in a different situation where they can be successful, but they're not going to be successful if the job outgrows the person. You can train them, but only so far. And so when the buyer comes in, they're going to look at your team, and they're going to want to make sure the team is a team. And they are going to, if you don't make changes, they will make changes. And sometimes they'll make them pretty darn quick. So you might as well do it when the time is right.
Paul, I think all good things have to come to an end. I think we should just do another show about case studies and talking about owners who have followed or not followed the 2-track model. I think that's worthy of an entirely other show of example after example, because as you're giving the examples, I'm thinking of clients, I'm thinking of my own family business. I just think that's fascinating. So we'll have to revisit and talk about that at some point.
Love to.
But so grateful, Paul, to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Ryan, any other final thoughts or anything at all?
Yeah, I mean, we've thrown a lot at the audience. There's a ton of considerations surrounding not just the moment for a business owner when they're approaching that sale conversation and being a two-track leader, a strategic two-track leader at that, but just a lot of information that we've thrown at them today. Bob, for anybody out there that's chewing on one or many pieces of information that we hit them with today, and they could benefit from opening up a dialogue with you and your team, just talking through how some of that might apply to them and their own unique situation, what would be the best way somebody can get in touch with you, Bob?
But you please come to us through our website, oswegoprivatewealth.com. We are also opwm.com. Either will get you to us. And let's have a conversation. And I would really emphasize that a good starting point is just to have a conversation. No obligation, no fee, nothing. And we'll talk about potentially doing a business valuation, doing a business assessment, and I am fascinated by learning about people's stories, how they started the business, why they started the business, where they're at today, what the other relationships look like, the advisors, their goals, their values. And that's a conversation that I love having. And I promise anybody who wants to start that conversation that I will put together. I have never not been able to come up with a minimum of 3 items that can improve a business owner's financial and personal situation, and they can do with whatever they want. We can engage together in a more formal business relationship. They can take that information to where they want, but I just love the process of having those conversations. So opwm.com, get in touch. Love to have that conversation. Before we break, Paul, could you tell people how they can reach you?
Yeah, sure. My website is focusbankers.com. My email is paul.dickson, Dickson, at focusbankers.com. Yeah, you can see my bio on there. You can see work we've done as a firm, and look forward to meeting some of you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Paul. And folks, we're going to take one final moment, as we always do, and thank you for stopping by, spending some time with us on the podcast today. If you enjoyed today's discussion with Paul, you learned a thing or two, make sure you hit that subscribe button on the platform that you did listen or watch us on today so that you don't miss out on any future content where Bob and I unpack these wealth management discussions. We bring on some great guests because at the end of the day, we would just want to provide value to you and yours out there for your financial world. Before Bob and Paul, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long now, but we appreciate you stopping by and being with us on Lessons by the Lake.